The Provoke Podcast, brought to you by Provoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of our CCO podcast, where I am joined by Noel from Covista. And if there's a reason that you haven't heard of Covista, we'll get to that as we launch into our discussion. But let's start with you, Megan, and tell us a little bit about your background and your career trajectory and how you ended up where you are now.
First, Paul, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm really thrilled to be here today. I have always looked for a career that's grounded in purpose. When I was in business school, I was in an ethics class in Georgetown, and we were talking about the idea, do business have a responsibility to give back? And it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and formal corporate responsibility, philanthropy, corporate affairs departments were yet to be established. And you saw a lot of companies getting in trouble for environmental issues or labor issues. And I was fascinated. And I really wanted to dedicate the first part of my career to helping companies do really good in the world while also do well by their business. And This is me being an annoying host now. I'm going to interrupt you very briefly to say, go ahead.
The fact that you went to business school is in and of itself interesting to me. Tell me a little bit about how well you felt that prepared you for a career in PR. I'm impressed that you went to business school because I think it's a better environment for what we do than journalism school, pissing off half my audience. I'm also impressed that you went to a business school that had an ethics sort of class involved in it. But tell me a little bit about that and how it prepared you.
I was always fascinated in business. I thought I wanted to be a finance major, took two classes in finance and accounting, and quickly switched over to marketing and international business. And I was fascinated by globalization at that time, and media was starting to be globalized. And so that has really, that was quite interesting to me. Georgetown being a Catholic university, it's required for you to take two classes, no matter what major you were, an ethics class and a problem of God class. And so everyone who graduates from Georgetown takes those two classes. And within my ethics class, I think now today it's called responsible business, but this was a new concept that people were grappling with. And it was a pretty raucous debate. I felt pretty strongly, as I said, that, business has the responsibility and the privilege to not only provide goods and services to the world at a quality scale, but also use that influence to give back in a meaningful way to advance societal issues. So Richard Edelman, being the frontier that he is, was starting a corporate social responsibility practice at the time. And Russell Dubner, shout out to him. He is a huge mentor of mine. He hired me right out of college. And I was able to work with him and Richard to build that entire practice from the ground up. I went with Edelman through 3 different offices, New York, Chicago, where they're co-headquartered and where a big portion of their clients are at. And they also sent me to Amsterdam. And so I spent a time over in Europe working with our European clients on all sorts of what we say now is modern day corporate affairs. But then it was crisis and issues. It was building programs and commitments around societal engagements. It was stakeholder engagement with NGOs and governments. And so it was fascinating to be in my 20s and be able to do that work.
Okay, I want to loop back quickly. The problem of God is obviously beyond the scope of this podcast, though I'd love to discuss it with you offline at some point.
Sure thing.
But the intersection of ethics and public relations really interests me because I've always held the view that if you are in fact acting in the interests of your publics, right? If you're making all of your stakeholders happy, you're probably being ethical. And if you're being ethical, you'll almost certainly end up with good public relations, good stakeholders. So those two things fit hand in glove for me, but I'm not sure that everybody else sees it that way.
I guess I would say, what going through business school and going through ethics classes and then working in communications in the real world, everyone sort of viewed public relations as a spin, right? And in fact, a big part of our job now is to not spin. It's to be honest, be direct, be truthful, and to stand up when you don't think that those things are right internally and externally. So I actually think the background in the ethics and integrity, while it was meant in a business context, right, and from a compliance standpoint and do right in the regulatory sense, it has such it sets the moral compass for how us as practitioners should act day in and day out with each of our stakeholders and when to use our voice in the right way, especially internally, when we think that something is amiss. And it's not only going to be perceived that way by certain stakeholders, it could be just flat out wrong.
All right. Let me let you get back on track with your career path. I'm sorry.
No, all good. So I came home from Europe and got an amazing offer from PwC. They were one of my clients at the time. And I decided to try the in-house route. I got there and immediately we revamped the entire organization. So, let a bunch of people go and rebuilt the comms team from the ground up. Function. And whether it was business comms to CSR comms to crisis comms to social media, I did it all as I built it. And at the time, around 2017, my boss left. She went to go to, at that time, Facebook to work for Sheryl Sandberg when she was pretty hot. And Tim Ryan, who was the CEO at the time, gave me the top job as a comms leader. So I was in my young 30s and sitting on top of a comms organization that, if it was public, be a Fortune 50 company. So it was nothing short of remarkable. And I'm incredibly grateful to him and many others within the firm for giving me that shot. And during that time, we took that function from a very downstream tactical media relations function that was essentially a service provider for press releases and Twitter posts, and made it into something that was a true strategic partner across the business. We combined internal and external comms. We had change management and a project management team under us. And there was a time when that team was winning amazing awards. The two that stick out the most to me, Paul, that have the most significance are that we won Best In-House Team and Best Place to Work in the same year. And to me as a leader, there is nothing better than showcasing the power of that team to not only be a best-in-class team, but it be an awesome place to go and build your career at the same time. And so as a leader, that was probably to date one of the biggest, most proud moments I've had.
And that was where you and I first crossed paths,
Yes.
I think, on a yacht in Cannes, right?
Yes, not a bad place to cross paths.
Not at all. Okay, so PwC for several years.
Yeah.
And then back into the agency world briefly.
Yep. So I, after a decade, I wanted to go back to the agency, and Golin had an amazing opportunity where they had a role, corporate affairs global president, and I wanted a chance to get broader exposure to more clients and different industries and start to rebuild a team. And I loved my time at Golin to get the diversity of the business challenges that were out there. During that time, President Trump got reelected into office. He quickly put into a variety of different policies such as tariffs, such as a pullback on DE&I that made being at the cross section of so many clients so interesting to see how different industries and organizations handled such tricky business and societal challenges. And then I got a call from my current company, the CEO, Steve Beard. He is fantastic. I've known Steve for a long, long time. And he came with an offer that was just quite special to be the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of Covista and to have comms, IR, GR, thought leadership, enterprise brand, alumni, and sustainability and impact all part of my portfolio. And to say that those jobs come around often, it would be a complete lie. And so it was just an amazing offer to be able to be part of an organization that is both doing really good in the world and having a meaningful impact for investors and stakeholders.
So it seems to me, having chatted with you about this before, that there were two, maybe three elements to your decision to move on, despite how much fun you were having on the agency side. There was the scope of the role which you've just described. There's the fact that you had a tremendous amount of respect for Steve Beard, but also the company, which at the time was Adtalem Health. I'm not sure that name is going to be much more familiar to our audience than Covista. So tell us a little bit about the company and what it does. My first impression was, well, that's not a very exciting realm. So tell me why I'm wrong about that and what was exciting about the sort of niche that you're in.
Yep. So Adtalem Global Education recently rebranded to Covista, and more than a name and a brand change, it is a recognition of the company's size and scope and scale in the healthcare education space. Let me just tell you a couple stats that I think will change your opinion. We have 10,000 colleagues. We educate 97,000 students a year. We have 385,000 alumni. Every year we graduate 24,000 healthcare professionals that go out into the field and have an impact in the healthcare communities. Doctors, nurses, behavioral health specialists, social services providers. And if you think about a business and societal challenge, this is what was so interesting to me, is there is no doubt, especially in America, that we have a healthcare workforce shortage, right? Every month, for example, there are more than 700,000 healthcare jobs that are posted and only 300,000 healthcare workers to fill those jobs. And that doesn't get into the machinations of a doctor can't do a nurse's job, can't do an MRI tech, et cetera. So over a course of a year, you have more than 8.4 million jobs that are posted around healthcare, and those are going unfulfilled. We're releasing a study that we did with Gallup, and we found in the study that we surveyed 160 healthcare executives and 1,300 clinicians, all agree that there's a healthcare workforce shortage, but now they are saying to us that it is a care quality crisis. 50% of the executives went even further. They said to us they have to reduce patient capacity because they can't find the right types of workers. So you go back to my point about graduating 24,000 folks a year. Let's take Georgetown, for example. Great business school. It also has an amazing nursing school. It graduates 250 nurses a year. That's not going to solve the healthcare workforce challenge. And so for a company that is able to, across our 5 institutions, graduate quality doctors, nurses, social services providers, public health specialists that are going to make a real meaningful impact in helping solve the healthcare workforce shortage, that was what was so interesting to me as an individual and an executive that wants to marry both performance and purpose. I couldn't have thought of an opportunity that could do both at the same time. And so that was what was attracting me to the role.
Okay. And I mean, am I unusual in not having been familiar, or was it a company that had sort of deliberately or accidentally adopted a fairly low profile outside of its particular area of expertise?
You're not wrong. Adtalem is a holding company. We have 5 institutions as part of our portfolio. Chamberlain University is the largest nursing school in the country. Walden is another large university. We have both American University of the Caribbean, Ross Med, and Ross Vet. Those are beloved brands and institutions by our students. What we really wanted to do for the past several years is have the enterprise brand be behind the scenes and allow the consumer brands or institutions, if you will, shine. We're at a point in our trajectory where, given our size and scale and what we think is an opportunity is to have a meaningful impact in both a business and societal challenge, where we want to shift the enterprise brand, not to replace the consumer brands, but more similar to what you would see in other holding companies where they have a dual purpose. And so we start to go out and showcase the power of the enterprise brand and our size and scale in the marketplace.
Right. So then let's talk about the other thing that we mentioned, which is the scope of the role, which I think, first of all, we both agree is not as common as it should be. To have that sort of vast array of communications and related functions all under one umbrella. But also, and I'm going to assume you agree with me, the best way of doing it in an increasingly complex, interrelated world, that you can't hope to manage your reputation with all of those different stakeholder groups in an isolated way. You have to bring it all together. So tell me a little bit about how that works and how it fits into the management structure.
Yep. Such a great question. The role was set up specifically, and Steve Beer gets all the credit for this. He wanted to bring all the storytellers together. And so he thought that you can't have storytellers for the investment community sit over here, or storytellers for the media community sit over there, and storytellers for our people sit in a third place, that you had to bring them all together. And if they are, in theory, they're able to tell a better, a more cohesive, and more consistent story across our entire stakeholder group. In turn, that will help build trust and consistency and have a halo effect to our reputation, both internally and externally, with all of our stakeholders. Secondly, he thought this is also an opportunity for folks that are storytellers like myself to storytell to different places, right? I grew up doing media relations, and the media for a big portion of my career was my primary sort of audience that I was communicating to. Being in this job, I've loved being able to learn more about our investment community, learn more about our regulators and our policy community, learn more about the NGOs and community organizations that we work with, and stitch together a really thoughtful narrative that we're able to bring them about our company and what we stand for all together. And so I think it's a great model. I wish others would adopt it. We see portions of it. I think the biggest shift from this job from other corporate affairs jobs is that IR and brand sit under me as well. And so that has been quite an interesting and exciting part of the role.
And how does that affect your relationship with other members of the management team? I'm thinking particularly of the fact that, one of the things that seems to me to have fractured the storytelling role is that the CFO in particular likes to have investor relations rather firmly under his or her control. So how does that work? And what's the status of the sort of brand and marketing function?
Yeah. So let me hit the first one on finance. I think it applies to all stakeholders. I believe that I can't do my job successfully unless I partner very closely with everyone else, whether it's with finance on IR, whether it's with legal on GR, whether it's with HR on internal communications. I could go on and on. It requires strong partnership and strong collaboration and understanding each other's strengths. Let's continue to use the finance example. I rely on the finance team for the numbers and the performance of the company. What our job is then to architect that into a story for our investors beyond the numbers, right? And so in each of those cases, if we understand each other's strengths and rely upon them, even if there's debate and discussion, we know that it's coming from the right place, which is to tell the right story to our investment community. Same thing with the brand. A strong partnership with my CMO. He's the person that I talk to the most every single day. And I know there can be often tensions between the CMO and the CCO or CCAO. Is now my yes, but this is now my second time having the CMO be a peer to me. It was the same thing at PwC. And in both cases, those are my closest relationships. They see things slightly differently and I see things slightly differently. And we're able to come together in a way where we're able to make 1 + 1 = 3. And so I truly value those types of relationships. On the brand refresh, it was a strong and equal partnership between myself and our CMO. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done together. And I don't think that would have happened if it was another sort of organizing principle.
How do you come up with meaningful metrics for an award, a role that is so broad and diverse? You're managing multiple relationships. How do you sort of demonstrate success and the impact of what you do on the business success?
Yep. So we have a strong reputation management system in place. It's around outputs, impact, and outcomes. Outputs are exactly what you see. They're the tactics and they bring them to life. But that is just, to me, an input to getting to the impact and the outcomes. Ultimately, we have perception metrics of where we want, how we want to be perceived with each of our different stakeholders, and then a strong tracking system against that. And that is an enterprise goal. So that while I may shepherd that process, it is something the entire management system is held responsible for, because it is something that if we do, we all share in the credit of success. If we all don't, we all sort of share in the burden of fixing it. And it always takes a village with those things. And so we have strong reputation tracking against our key stakeholders and measure that on a quarterly basis. And I think that's similar to a way a lot of corporate affairs groups are starting to move towards, to get beyond the tactics and the outputs, because when you get into the boardroom, how do you quantify whether 10 media hits or a newsletter open rate of 70% is good or not, right? The board is going to say, is that good? Is that not? If it goes down, is that bad? And, and so you get into a very tactical discussion as opposed to a more strategic discussion at the board, where you want to talk about how are we doing against the perception that we want and the trust that we want to build with each of our different stakeholders, and where we're not quite where we want to be, how are we closing that gap, and what's the basket of tactics or actions that we're taking to do that. So it becomes very quickly a much more meaningful conversation than a conversation about open rates and press hits.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the rebrand, because that's sort of a massive thing to take on, sort of as soon as you hit the ground, as it were. How evolved was it when you got there, and how did you either initiate or slot into the process?
It was in the early days when I got to the company. Both Steve and our CMO were working on it together. And so I had an opportunity to jump in right from the positioning stage to say, as we have evolved from a diversified education company to a place where 90% of our business is in healthcare, how do we redefine who we are and what we stand for in the marketplace? education institution, a healthcare workforce partner. We have a lot of talent partnerships within healthcare systems that we wanted to be able to showcase. And so we worked on the repositioning. The same time, we worked on the brand and the visual identity. And that's always such a special part of someone's career to be able to be a part of that. The name Covista is actually quite special. It stands for co, which means collaboration, community, connection, and vista, which is future. So a shared vision for the future. And so that's quite special when we look at the name and how we want it to appear in the marketplace and be received. We also worked on all of the assets that come with it. So refreshing our website, refreshing our purpose, vision, and values. For the first time, we had an employer brand. And so worked with the CHRO on elevating and crafting our employer brand and who and how we want to stand for in the marketplace with talent. And then we put together a series of marketing communications collateral, whether it's thought leadership, an ad campaign. I had the privilege to work with our impact lead to put together an impact strategy that we released with the brand, which is a multi-year commitment to build and sustain the healthcare workforce. So get people excited about healthcare careers, get them through the process and relieve the financial burdens. And then something that's, Paul, is really interesting to me personally is once clinicians are in the field, there's more and more research about the impact on the mental health aspect of their job. And so we have made commitments with the Lorna Breen Foundation and the Swartz Center for Compassionate Health to be able to help support clinicians and practitioners in the field with their mental health and well-being, which I think is something that is desperately needed given the environment that practitioners work in today.
I think, a lot of people who aren't immersed in our field are like, oh, look, they have a new logo and a new name and a different shade of blue or whatever. But this is obviously much more holistic and much more immersive and a change in the way the company thinks about itself and its relationship with the world.
You're exactly right. At the end of the day, the brand and visual identity and the shift is a marker of the company's transformation from a diversified education company to the country's largest healthcare educator, and both the business and societal commitment that we have to being a meaningful player, knowing that we can't do this alone. We want to work with policymakers. We want to work with healthcare systems and partners. We want to work in the communities, especially in rural communities where the health systems are already very fragile, to be able to support the systems. I also want to touch on the education side of this, and this is something that coming from an elite education, I wasn't quite familiar with, right? The education system isn't built for non-traditional learners. And let me unpack that for a minute. I went to school, graduated when I was 22, went off, and I'm now 20 plus years later doing the same career. That's actually an anomaly, right? Most people change their careers 2 or 3 times. And so what our institutions do is appeal to the non-traditional learner, the adult learner, the career changer, the part-time worker, the nighttime or the weekend warrior that needs education in a different way. And so to be able to help people switch from one career to where we're doing in healthcare is quite fulfilling. And at a time when education, especially higher education, is being questioned by the American public, to be able to be that, build a system that's directly supporting a societal need and giving people, a dream that they've always wished for is to be a healthcare worker, that's quite special.
And tell me a little bit about the sort of communication strategy and sort of how you prioritize stakeholders. And again, sort of when and how you'll know that this was a successful launch.
Yeah. So we look at our stakeholders, obviously, and there's a B2B side of this and a B2C. So our students and our alumni are in the B2C, our investors, our health policy and education policy folks, as well as our health systems and hospital system partners are another side. And then obviously we have our colleagues. And so we're looking at all of them using both data and anecdotal interactions to be able to manage our relationships with them. My team is set up in a very specific way where we have our head of IR and he is supposed to take care of our investors. We have our head of alumni and she's supposed to take care of our alumni, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have people that are responsible for managing each of these different stakeholders. And goes back to the point as being under one roof together, we're able to manage that more synergistically and more quickly together. And so between our day-to-day interactions and the ongoing data that we're getting, we're able to manage our reputation and perception quite closely. And I think we'll know when success is when people start to view us very differently from just a for-profit education company into really being seen as a healthcare education company that is making a meaningful difference in both business and society.
Okay. All right. It sounds great. And congratulations on the relaunch and
Thank you.
the rebrand. What happens next? Where do you go from here?
Well, we will continue to work with each of our stakeholders to bring the message to light. We are really excited, as I mentioned, around our impact work to work directly with hospital systems and healthcare partners, and also to get our people involved. We have amazing staff as part of our colleagues, from academics to nonprofit leaders to government leaders to nurses and doctors who are on our staff, and they are itching to be able to go out and work in the communities to be able to support students and clinicians. And so that's a really exciting, but also very meaningful part of what's next to bring this commitment to life.
Great. Well, thank you, Megan. Wonderful conversation. Sounds like a great job. I can tell that you're having a blast, which is always helpful. And very much appreciate your time because there must be a lot of demands on us right now.
Thanks, Paul. It's so great to be with you and really thank you for the time.
You've been listening to the Provoke podcast, brought to you by Provoke Media and produced by the international broadcast specialist Marketeers.